Hello, welcome to my retirement roadmap, and this is the second video in a Building a Tips Ladder series. So we're going to talk about essential expenses and also an overview of tips. So when we're talking about essential expenses, these are the expenses that we need to have covered in case there's a downturn in the stock market. So just kind of giving a foundation here, as a general rule, we want to take money out of the stock market to fund our retirement, to make up our retirement paycheck. That's not covered by like Social Security or a pension or the other stuff. So we want to draw out of the market when we can, but we don't want to draw out of the stock market if it is down. So we want to sell when the stock market is high, sell when price is high, and if the prices are low, then we don't want to buy. We don't want to sell. Okay, what we want to do is take money out of our tips ladder that is there for protection. And so with this tips ladder, it's like we need to cover our essential expenses. So I guess one way of thinking about it is if we go back to when we were working, and if we lost our job, for example, we pretty much knew what bills needed to be covered, what was absolutely essential, that sort of thing. And we knew what we could cut out the fat, for example, that sort of thing. We had that easy to understand. And this is kind of similar in that we want to see what our essential expenses are. Now, I listen to a podcast very consistently, great podcast, and they talk about the minimum dignity floor, and they talk about these essential expenses. They use food, utilities, housing, healthcare, and transportation. So that's like, those are the essential. They call it minimum dignity floor. Dignity is a pretty powerful word, but I like the way they explain that. Now, I've added taxes because it's possible, when we're paying for these other things, we may need to pay taxes as we withdraw money. So I've included that as well. The other thing is I want to include just we'll call it a little more comfort into this essential living. Again, the stock market's dropped. We don't want to cut everything out. So when we're calculating our essential expenses, we can include, for example, limited dining out. I mean, that's like one of the things you say, hey, if things go down, for example, if I lost my job, we just don't eat out anymore. That's critical. We just give that. But I'm saying, well, let's say instead of 2 to 3 times a week, maybe it's 2 to 3 times a month. We'll put that into our essential expenses. Same thing with travel. So instead of maybe doing a European cruise every year, we'll just cut that back to a local cruise, and do the inside cabin, for example. So that's what I want to say. Count that as essential. Now, how do we figure out these expenses? If you're like most people, you probably don't have a really good idea of how much your current run rate is, how much you're really spending. And I wished I had an answer to say, here's an easy way of finding out what that amount is. Here's some software tool. Here's this or that. I haven't found one yet that I found many of them, but I haven't found one that I really liked. So I can't give any recommendations there, but I will say there is one that I have found that I like, and it's available to a lot of people. And that's if you are a Chase customer. I'm not endorsing Chase. I'm just saying, here's an example. If you're a Chase customer, and I am, we have a credit card through them, and we spend almost everything on that credit card that we can, and we pay it off every month. So just so you know that, pay it off once a month or every month. And you can go to their tool, then you can also link external accounts. That's the key. Chase has this way of linking external accounts. And then you can run reports and it will show you what your spending is. It does a pretty good job of categorizing it. And that's a good start on calculating expense. Just an idea there. If you're crazy like I am and you use personal financial software for calculating expenses, you probably got that covered. And I do. I'm crazy. I track everything. I watch every day for expenses because I want to make sure there's not any sort of fraud on the credit card or the bank account or stuff. That's important to me. Okay, so we got to go in and calculate those expenses. I do have another bullet point here kind of as an aside, we talked about Social Security in a previous class series, and this part here, Social Security can be a bridge that would be embedded in this tips ladder. Okay, so let's transition now over to a tips overview. And I heard this, or I actually saw this in my financial feed. An article popped up about, how bonds can help mitigate the stock market volatility, and it used the analogy of shock absorbers, and I love that. And tips are bonds. Okay, so they are shock absorbers from when the stock market's going up and down. Tips are U.S. Treasury bonds. Okay, I think I've mentioned that they're Treasury inflation protected securities. Okay, so when they are born, I like to use the term born. When they first come out, they are issued with $1,000 face value. Now, I'm going to avoid going into all the intricacies of how the pricing works and how they're sold and all that stuff. It's fascinating information, but I don't think it's at all helpful when we're talking about building a tips ladder. So they come out as $1,000. And then what's super important to understand is every day they are adjusted for inflation. And since we are in an inflationary period, we have been, inflation, a little bit of inflation is actually good. Just kind of keeps the economy going the right direction. If we ever get into deflation again, that's really not a good thing. So inflation's good, mild inflation. But these tips, so they start at $1,000. Every day they go up. And the point is we are holding these to maturity. So effectively, it's pretty easy to say that you will get back $1,000 worth of purchasing power when these mature. You'll get that back. And I should say the adjusted amount. Now we'll see we're going to be spending more than $1,000 when we buy our tips. We'll be getting at least the amount that we paid for our tips back. That's safe. I think it's okay to say that. All right? Again, that means though we have to hold these to maturity. Tips are reliable. They're predictable. We don't have to sit there and, like the stock market going up and down. We don't have to worry about that. These are just doing what they're supposed to do. We hold them to maturity. We're good to go. And I think this is a good point where I want to come over and I will show an example here, okay, of this tips as we're trying to find our essential expenses. I've just given some kind of round numbers here. So let's say that in 2026, we'll just pretend the year's just starting. Before you know it'll be over, but it's just starting. Let's say the run rate is $100,000 a year. That's how much you spend. Okay, that we say is I don't call it the first rung, okay, but it's like the zero rung of this ladder. It is sitting in an account, ideally an account that the taxes have already been paid. For extra credit, it's in a Roth account, but we'll talk about that in a different series. Don't want to go down that pathway right now. But anyway, this $100,000 is highly available. We don't have to worry about it. That's for 2026. Then we have basically, when we calculated our essential expenses, we determined that we need $5,000 a year. Excuse me, $5,000 a month. So that's $60,000 a year. And so we've calculated that all the way down to 2032. Now, we don't have to worry about inflation because inflation's already covered because we're using tips. So when we purchase tips, even though like next year it's going to be a little more than $60,000 of nominal amount, adjusted for inflation, we don't have to worry about that because we're just talking about real numbers. So that's taken care of. So we have $60,000 up through 2032. Then I also wanted to show like what happens if we have secure income coming in. So in our first example here, we're seeing that in Social Security kicks in 2032. So $15,000, and maybe that's like half, 6 months worth of Social Security. So we're getting $15,000. All right. And then other income, let's say you have pension income that's starting, or there's annuity income that's kicking in, some other secure income amount that's coming in that we can count on. And so that's over here, uh, also in this other column. So then what we need to do is we take the amount that the essential amount and we subtract out this secure income, and that tells us the amount that we need for the rung of the ladder. Okay? So this essentially, we're setting aside and saying, hey, we're going to have $385,000 of secure income that we've got protected in case the stock market goes, crazy and drops. We're covered that way. That's really what we're talking about. The beginnings of saying what our essential expenses are. So that the good example there. I will now talk just a few more things, and then we'll go into an actual example. So we talk about tips. We talked about that there's securities. Currently, there are 52 available. That number will fluctuate throughout the year, but there are only 52 tips available, which I like. I mean, you think how many stocks are available, but that's how many tips are available. And then we build a ladder. We're going to show that in the next video. Oh, also I wanted to explain as well, we're talking about these essential expenses. You can also buy tips to cover other known future expenses. So for example, let's say you say, in 5 years, I want to take a round the world cruise, for example. Okay, that seems to be common for some people. Or you want to go to the Antarctic or something like that. You just want to do this a major trip and you want to start setting money aside. You can do that. And what you do is you buy the tips that matures when you'll need that money. And it's awesome. It's separated. It's secure. It's adjusted for inflation. It works. And I'll give you one other quick example, just as an aside. So Jeff and I we needed to get a new vehicle pretty quickly last year. It's been almost a year ago, and we didn't have our liquidity reserve set up the way it needed to be. We couldn't just go out and buy a new vehicle, because I don't like to finance, and we ended up leasing a vehicle. Okay, long story there. Don't need to go into all the details, but we ended up leasing a vehicle, and then I'm like, oh, when this thing, when the lease is up, we turn the keys over, the car and the keys, we have nothing. Okay. And I don't like that, but that's just kind of the way it worked out, and I'm okay with that at this point. But in the meantime, that's what we do. We buy tips so when the lease matures, we will have enough money to buy that vehicle outright, should we want to keep it, or we'll have money set aside to purchase a reliable used car. How does that sound? Okay, that's enough for now, and then we'll meet on the next video. We're giving a demo of actually purchasing a tips ladder.